There are moments in history when time seems to freeze, moments when headlines aren't just words on a screen, they are a punch to the gut. Iran attacks U.S. bases in Qatar. This isn't just news, it's a wake-up call. Not just for governments, but for people, for communities, for you, because the world just shifted. And when the world shifts, so must we. In times of uncertainty, fear is the default reaction. It's easy to point fingers, to post angry thoughts, to sit back and wait for someone else to fix the mess. But history doesn't remember the fearful. It remembers the courageous. It remembers those who stood up not because they had to, but because they chose to. Body purpose-driven messaging. We are not gathered here today to talk about missiles or military tactics. We are here to talk about meaning, about values, about who we are when we are tested. Because the true battle isn't only out there, it's within us. How do we respond? What do we stand for? Attacks like these are meant to destabilize, to divide, to instill panic. But in every act of aggression, there is a hidden opportunity, the opportunity to come together. To define our purpose not in times of peace, but in the face of adversity. Think about it, the greatest innovations, the strongest alliances, the most powerful movements in human history weren't born out of comfort. They were born in fire. They were born when ordinary people chose to do extraordinary things, when leaders rose, not because of rank or title, but because of vision and responsibility. And this is what the world needs now. Not reactionaries, but leaders. In homes, in classrooms, in companies, in every corner of society. People who will say, "This moment will not define us. We will define it." So don't let this be just another headline you scroll past. Let it be a mirror. What kind of person are you when the world is shaking? Do you wait for permission, or do you step into the storm with clarity and conviction? We may not control the bombs, but we control how we respond. And response is where character is revealed. When the world is shaken by conflict, when headlines scream of attacks and instability, many freeze, unsure of how to act or where to turn. It's in these uncertain moments that we often search for someone to lead, someone to bring clarity to the chaos. But the truth is, leadership isn't something granted in peaceful times and held onto during war. It is not gifted by title or inherited by rank. Leadership is revealed in the crucible of crisis. When everything feels unstable, when the outcome is unclear, that's when the real leaders emerge, not with loud proclamations, but with grounded purpose. Crisis doesn't make a person a leader. It simply exposes what already lies beneath. When tension builds and the stakes rise, those who have anchored themselves in values, in responsibility, and in vision naturally rise to the surface. They don't do it for applause or recognition. They do it because they can't not act. Because leadership, at its core, is not a posture of control, it is a practice of service. The people who step up during chaos are those who understand that moments of disruption are invitations to influence, to protect, to guide, and to heal. Too often we think leaders must wear uniforms or stand behind podiums. But look closer. In any time of crisis, you'll find the real leaders everywhere. A teacher comforting her students as war becomes reality, a parent calming a child during the uncertainty of global instability, a manager speaking words of hope to a fearful team. These aren't formal roles of power, but they are profound acts of leadership, because real leadership is defined by behavior, not by badges. It's about what you do when it would be easier to do nothing at all. When news of attacks hits, panic is contagious. People look for direction, and they often look outward. But the most transformative leaders don't wait for orders, they respond to the inner voice that says, "Step forward." They bring calm when others bring confusion. They ask questions when others throw blame. They make choices rooted in principles, not popularity. Their strength is not in volume, but in conviction. and that conviction becomes a compass for others, a stabilizing force that brings coherence in the middle of chaos. What separates these leaders from everyone else isn't access to information or even experience. It's a mindset. It's the understanding that crisis is not the time to shrink, it's the time to expand. It's the belief that doing nothing is still a decision and not the right one. These leaders choose action even when they're afraid. They choose service even when it's inconvenient. And they choose clarity even when certainty is out of reach. They show up not because it's safe, but because it's necessary. They remind others that in every dark hour there is light to be found if someone is willing to carry the torch. Fear is one of the most natural human responses. It's ancient, wired deep into our biology, designed to keep us alive. When danger appears, when the unknown surrounds us, when headlines scream of attacks and escalation, fear rises like a tide, fast and overwhelming. It can take over our minds, shift our focus inward, and narrow our ability to see clearly. But while fear is automatic, it does not have to be permanent. Purpose, unlike fear, is not a reflex, it is a choice. It is a decision we make to live for something greater than our survival. And when fear and purpose collide, purpose has the power to transform everything. Fear tells us to stay still, to keep our heads down, to wait for the storm to pass. It tells us that we're not capable, that we don't know enough, that it's someone else's responsibility. But purpose pushes us forward. It reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, it is action in spite of it. Fear shrinks us, but purpose expands us. It gives us clarity in the midst of confusion, and it strengthens our spine when the weight of the world tries to bend it. When acts of violence and threats of war spread through our consciousness, the initial reaction is often helplessness. We see missiles fly, bases burn, and lives changed in an instant. But what if we understood that the most powerful response to fear isn't retreat, it's recommitment? Recommitment to our values, to our mission, to the people who look to us for strength. Purpose allows us to keep walking when the path ahead is obscured. It doesn't eliminate the fear, but it puts it in its place. It makes fear a passenger, not the driver. People who live with purpose respond differently to crisis. They don't deny the danger. They acknowledge it and then ask what they can do to bring light into the darkness. They become voices of reason, bridges of understanding, and sources of hope. Purpose fuels resilience. It reminds us that there is something worth standing for, something worth building, even when the world seems determined to destroy. It gives meaning to the pain, direction to the uncertainty, and discipline to our energy. With purpose, every action becomes intentional, every word matters, every choice reflects something deeper than reaction, it reflects identity. Fear is contagious, but so is purpose. When one person begins to live with clarity, others follow. They see that it's possible to be grounded even when everything feels like it's falling apart. They see that it's possible to lead, to speak, to act not because the situation is safe, but because the cause is just. Purpose is the invisible force that moves us from paralysis to progress. It reminds us that we are not defined by what we fear, but by what we are willing to fight for through fear. In the face of violence and chaos, when the very fabric of international stability seems to be unraveling, it becomes easy to fall into the trap of division. We start categorizing people, nations, beliefs, and intentions. We retreat into silos, driven by fear and uncertainty. But it's in these moments that our greatest weapon isn't retaliation or rhetoric, it's unity. Because unity is not simply the absence of disagreement. It is the presence of shared commitment. It's a deliberate, courageous act of choosing common ground over conflict, connection over separation, and solidarity over suspicion. When news breaks of an attack on U.S. bases in Qatar, the world doesn't just look at governments, it looks at people. It looks at communities, it looks at what humanity does when shaken, and what it sees often determines whether fear deepens or hope rises. When we stand shoulder to shoulder, despite our differences, we send a powerful message that aggression cannot break the bonds we build, that missiles may hit buildings, but they cannot hit the unity of a determined people. Unity doesn't mean we all think the same or agree on every issue. That's not strength, that's conformity. Real unity is forged in diversity. It's when different voices come together to sing the same song of purpose. It's when cultures, ideologies, and experiences are woven together into something stronger than any one part. And in times of crisis, this kind of unity becomes a shield not just against external threats, but against the internal collapse of morale, spirit, and resolve. The power of unity lies in its ability to multiply strength. One person's courage inspires another's. One leader's vision fuels an entire team. One act of compassion spreads across borders, lifting people out of despair and reminding them that they are not alone. The world becomes infinitely stronger when individuals see their own well-being tied to the well-being of others. It's this sense of interconnectedness, this understanding that your fight is my fight, your pain is my pain, that becomes the foundation for resilience. And unity isn't passive. It must be practiced. It shows up in the words we choose, the support we offer, the judgment we withhold, and the hands we extend. It's in the courage to say, we are in this together, even when the world is pulling us apart. It's choosing to see beyond national flags and political lines to the human beings standing on the other side. It's refusing to let fear define who belongs and who doesn't. In every act of terror or hostility, the goal is isolation. But unity defeats that goal before it takes root. It creates strength not through power, but through connection. The more we recognize our shared humanity across nations, across beliefs, across experiences, the harder it becomes to divide us. In unity, we don't just survive moments of crisis, we rise above them. Influence is often misunderstood. It's too frequently associated with fame, authority, or control. We imagine it belongs only to the powerful, those in high office, those who command armies, those who hold the microphone in front of millions. But that perception is not only limiting, it's dangerous. Because the truth is, every individual carries influence, not because of their reach, but because of their presence, not because of their platform, but because of their example. Influence starts in the small, consistent, and often unseen choices we make when the world is uncertain. When the news breaks of attacks, threats, or instability, people naturally look for direction. Some turn to headlines, some to politics, some to panic. But the most impactful influence rarely comes from the loudest voice, it comes from the calmest one. The parent who, instead of transmitting fear to their children, speaks words of reassurance and shows strength through steady action. The teacher who stands before a room of young minds and decides to focus not on the chaos of the world, but on the courage that lives within it. The neighbor who checks in on others, offering solidarity in place of suspicion. These aren't small acts. They're the quiet beginnings of a ripple that spreads further than we can measure. We underestimate the power of our tone, our posture, and our intention. In times of fear, people mimic what they see. Panic multiplies when modeled, but so does composure, so does empathy. When you choose to stay grounded, others around you feel safer. When you choose to speak hope instead of despair, someone listens even if they never tell you. This is influence. The ability to shift the energy in a room, the ability to guide others through uncertainty by the way you carry yourself through it. Even in digital spaces, influence doesn't require followers, it requires courage. What you choose to share, how you react to anger or misinformation, How you express your values, all of it matters. You have no idea who's watching, who's being affected by your words, or who's finding the strength to persevere because of your consistency. Your sphere of influence might be small, but it is never insignificant, and influence is not just about what we say, it's about what we do when no one's watching. It's the integrity of our private decisions. It's how we treat people when we're stressed. It's whether we allow fear to change us or challenge us to be better. When others see that we are not swept away by the noise, they begin to believe that they, too, can stand firm. Your discipline becomes their inspiration. Your compassion becomes their model. And slowly, silently, your influence grows not because you forced it, but because you earned it through consistency and character. The world doesn't need more power right now. It needs more presence. It needs people who understand that leadership is not a role, it's a responsibility, that how we live, especially in hard times, is the greatest message we will ever send. Strength is often misrepresented in our culture. It's portrayed as force, as dominance, as a fierce and immediate reaction to threat. We see it in images of retaliation, in language laced with vengeance, in the glorification of striking back harder and faster. But real strength isn't found in the instinct to hit back, it's found in the ability to choose direction over reaction. It's not about muscle or might, but about meaning. Strength, in its highest form, is intentional. It is measured. It is principled. And in moments of conflict or crisis, that kind of strength is what the world truly needs. When a nation is attacked or challenged, the first impulse may be to respond swiftly to show that we are not afraid, that we will not be intimidated. But speed is not always synonymous with strategy. True strength is not reactionary, it's responsive. It takes into account the bigger picture, the long-term consequences, and the values that must remain intact regardless of what happens externally. Strength is not about appearing fearless. It's about being grounded even when fear is present. It's about choosing to lead with purpose, not pride. Direction requires clarity, and clarity comes from understanding what you stand for before you're tested. Without that, reaction will always take the wheel. You'll lash out because you don't know where you're going, and the noise will seem louder than your inner compass. But those who possess true strength have already done the internal work. They know what they believe, they know what they protect, and they know what line they will never cross, not because it's easy, but because it's right. Think about the individuals and movements that have shifted the course of history. They didn't just resist their enemies, they redirected the world. They didn't collapse into rage or retreat into fear. They stood firm, they moved forward, and they did it with intention. Whether it was through silence, speech, sacrifice, or strategy, they used their strength not just to survive, but to shape something better. And that's what direction gives us, the ability to shape rather than react. A missile may trigger a defense system, but a vision triggers change. A bomb may destroy a building, but direction rebuilds nations. To possess strength in direction is to rise above the noise and say, we will not be defined by what they did. We will be defined by what we choose to do next. That choice, repeated over time, becomes culture. It becomes legacy. Strength that lacks direction is dangerous. It burns fast, it destroys, and it leaves ashes in its wake. But strength with direction, that's the force that moves humanity forward. It channels emotion into action, pain into purpose, and fear into focus. It refuses to be provoked into becoming the very thing it stands against. It listens, learns, and then leads. It doesn't fight for the sake of fighting, it fights to protect peace, to uphold values, to defend what matters without becoming what it despises. When global events shake the world, when missiles strike, when alliances tremble, when uncertainty spreads like wildfire, there's a collective moment where everything pauses. People stop to process what just happened. But more than that, they look inward. Because these moments, as terrifying and disruptive as they are, act like mirrors. They reflect not just geopolitical tension, but human character. They force individuals, communities, and nations alike to confront who they really are beneath the surface, stripped of pretense, stripped of routine, stripped of comfort. Crisis does not ask who you want to be. It reveals who you truly are. These mirrors don't lie. They show the reflex of your heart, the wiring of your principles, the consistency, or lack thereof, of your integrity. You may spend years building an image of who you are, how you would behave in a crisis, how strong and ethical you claim to be. But when pressure mounts, when fear is in the air, and when chaos reigns, the mask falls away, and what's left is the real version of you, the version not rehearsed, not filtered, but raw, honest, and exposed. In moments like these, it becomes clear who leads with empathy and who leads with ego, who acts out of conviction and who acts out of insecurity, who steps up to serve and who steps back to protect themselves. The mirror doesn't flatter, it clarifies, and clarity is one of the most powerful tools in any human life. It strips away illusion and demands self-awareness, and from that self-awareness comes growth, if we're courageous enough to face what we see. This reflective quality isn't just personal, it's societal. It shows up in how we treat each other, how communities respond to fear, how leaders communicate, how neighbors react, and how families choose to move through the discomfort. Are we quick to judge, to divide, to label, or do we pause long enough to understand, to listen, to unite? Are we driven by impulse or guided by principle? Are we building or breaking, healing or harming? What we often forget is that the world is watching, not just through the lens of media or political commentary, but through a deeper, more human lens. Children are watching. Future leaders are watching. People who feel lost are looking for signs of clarity in someone else's behavior. The way we handle a crisis doesn't just determine the outcome of that crisis. It shapes the tone of our culture, the values of our future, the direction of our legacy. And while these mirrors can be uncomfortable, even painful, they are also essential. They don't only show us where we fall short. They show us where we still have room to rise. They show us our capacity for courage, our resilience, our ability to choose differently even when the stakes are high. They show us that in every moment of testing, there is a rare opportunity to evolve, to refine, and to redefine who we are not just for ourselves, but for the world watching closely.